Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3733 East Broadway. This is a special live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk, and we're so happy you could make us part of your day today, and it's a high honor to bring back to the program a guy who is following his inner path, inner urge, and inner cry towards musical peace and volcanism at the same time. I had an opportunity to see this cat on a boat. It seems like it was a long time ago. I think it was like a week ago. My ears are still burning from this trio effort. Scott Metzger, what an honor. Welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me.
I lost the let's just get right into it here. I wanted to play this clip of music and then for a minute or two, and then we'll come back and talk about it, okay?
Sounds good.
That was you with Wolf on the cruise last week, and I wanted to ask you. I think I heard you correctly when you said that it's been 6 years since you guys have started that group, or it was 6 years since you played that cruise, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about the growth of the band. If you feel like where the band stands at this point in terms of how far it's grown and where it can go.
Yeah, well, essentially the band started, we were sort of just a instrumental background music at a bar called the Loving Cup, which isn't there anymore, in Williamsburg, and the band was kind of forced into existence because we were supposed to back up a singer that night who ended up never showing up, and the club owner demanded that there be music, so we just started playing improvised instrumental music off the top of our heads with no game plan. Just kind of like talk about a feel and just start making some stuff up in that feel. And we never really talked about what it was going to be or what we were trying to be, but sort of like this sort of groovy kind of Motown influenced rockabilly stuff started coming out.
Right.
And that really became clear that was that was sort of the sound of the band. And I think that for the first couple of years, it stayed in that. It was pretty easy to define. It was like, okay, yeah, these guys are doing like a, groove-based sort of thing, and they're just kind of playing good grooves and good melodies, and it's sort of influenced by soul music and New Orleans stuff or Stax, that kind of stuff. The Stax record label.
That's interesting.
But then, and then in the last couple of years, though, it's gotten more and more off the grid. It's slowly, very hesitantly, started to sort of like, kind of veer a little bit more outside. Some other influences started creeping in, more like sort of maybe out jazz stuff, and different rhythm things started happening, just the idea of playing with time and dynamics, and that's really become a big focus over the last, year, I'd say 2 years.
Have you? This is I was talking to Scott Metzger here on the Jake Feinberg show. Had a chance to see him, and I mean, would you consider yourself the leader of that band? Definitely, Scott Metzger, leader of what?
Reluctantly, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I see. I love talking to reluctant leaders. They're beautiful people. But I mean, can you talk about how you? And I think this is going to go back. I know you hung with Rufus Reed and those cats at William Patterson, but that was the one thing that I thought that there was a really cool mix of different types of music and feel. I just wanted you to talk about dynamics. Everything in our time now. I mean, since things plugged in, it's the 50-year anniversary of the Summer of Love when they started to amplify everything. John Cipollina had his first rig built by Dan Healy in '65, and it's just gotten music has gotten progressively louder and louder and louder. And those two sets were burning, but I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you talk to people out there about how they can make an effort, subconscious or consciously, about how to use dynamic range to keep things quiet. The music, to keep it really quiet, and not so heavy. That was the only thing. It was the only. I just found that, like, really. I mean, honestly, it was an amazing performance, but there was not enough quiet. There wasn't from a whisper to a scream, so to speak. It just seemed like it would just be amped up to 10. I just wanted you to talk about your concept of dynamics and how you try to keep things, quiet.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it goes from gig to gig. You got to. Good musician always plays the room, right? And with Wolf, we're really lucky. Like, there are some gigs that we can get away with playing at like pin drop, volumes for a whole night sometimes.
Oh wow!
And I mean, Wolf audiences are incredible. That they'd be willing to go. I couldn't ask for a better audience. Because we change things all the time, and one of the things is dynamics. But yeah, to get to your question, like, I think that 90% or maybe higher of bands that have electric guitars in them just play too loud.
Absolutely, yeah.
And a lot of bands, they come out and they start their first song, and they start it on volume wise on 10. And they just stay there for however long their show is, and it's just that, the whole night. And with Wolf, like, I know that we talked for a second after the boat gig, and you mentioned like the ballads that we played on that. And to me, those are like that's some real grown up stuff to think about as a musician. To not try and most bands, I think, or a lot of bands try to like barrel over their audiences to get their attention. It's like, all right, here we come, and everything's on 10, and we, everything's as loud as we can get. But the idea of playing quietly so that an audience actually takes notice of you because you're playing so quietly, as opposed to taking notice of you because you don't give them a choice and you're just playing so loud. Anybody can do that. I don't know. But the idea of trying to draw them in, as opposed to blow them, through the back door with volume.
I mean, do you have advice for people that feel an angst to want to pull people in by blowing them out the door, and how you don't necessarily have to do that? I think, of course, it has to do also with like just your sort of aptitude and your, I mean, you were, I don't know.
Do I have an angst towards it, you said?
Well, no, I mean, like, what I'm saying is that you can see sometimes you go to live performances and people start at 10 because they want to bring people in right away, and that they stay at that level the entire time. And I wanted you to talk about why that doesn't have to be the case, and how you all, where basically you don't have to be screaming the whole time. I mean, that's sort of what I'm, and how, and I wonder, I mean, you can just riff on that. I mean, how did you learn to, was it from your jazz background? Was it just something consciously that you over time learned, or because I don't think people are even conscious of it, younger cats, because they've had this for a variety of reasons. But I'm not even sure if younger cats are even aware of it.
Right. I completely agree. You know, I don't know. For me, I mean, like talking about this kind of stuff, I always think of the Ahmad Jamal trio.
Sure.
Or even a better example, even for our talk, might even be, because we're talking about guitar players, is Jim Hall. You know, where, you know, I mean, my God, I saw Jim Hall probably 7 or 8 times, and some of those times, I mean, he'd be playing so quiet that you could hear. He would turn down the volume on his guitar so quiet that you could hear the guitar in the room acoustically, just like not coming through the amp.
Really?
You know?
Wow.
Like,
wow.
Oh yeah. I mean, he was like, yeah, exactly. And it's like, imagine seeing that, you know, and then you take that sort of musicality and sensitivity and then put it against what's happening in most situations, most live music situations. You know, it's like, it just makes it makes everything else look cute, you know?
Exactly. That's right.
Like, you know?
I just, yeah, I mean, I am craving. That to me, Hall was he was an irascible. He was a brilliant dude, and a phenomenal player. You listen to some of the stuff he did. There's like one album where I remember Airto's playing drums on it, but it's very mellow. I don't know. There's something about that was that, and again, you played to that crowd, which actually was a younger crowd. It was very young. I felt quite old there on the boat last week. The thing I was curious about with you, did you, like, when did you start to play music that, again, this is a technical term, but I just sort of have been getting hip to it and really enjoying this. When have you ever played music where there is no tonal center? Sort of out of the Ornette Coleman sort of bag a little bit.
Yeah, right. You know, I haven't had the opportunity to play a lot of that stuff like in public. You know, I've certainly done like a lot of improvising. Well, I mean, you know, like J-Rad definitely. You know, this band I play with, Joe Russo's Almost Dead. We get into that pretty much nightly. You know, there'll be a portion of the show that it goes there. And that's, you know, it's been on my radar for a very long time, and I've always enjoyed that stuff. And some of my favorite records of all time, there's a record called The Magic of Juju by Archie Shepp that is it Archie Shepp or is it Albert Eiler?
I'll look it up right now. I'll look it up. Yeah, go ahead. I know this is really interesting. Go ahead.
And that record is like, you know, it sounds like total chaos. You know, it's completely free. There's only 2 tracks on the whole record.
It's Archie Shepp. Archie Shepp.
Yeah, it's Archie Shepp. Right. Also, one of the best album covers of all time.
Wow, really? There's a skull on it, and a very psychedelic looking skull with flowers on it, green and red print. And then there's an 18-minute track and a 4-minute track. How does J-Rad lend itself? And first of all, the lineup on this, I've had a chance to interview a bunch of these cats. Norman Connors, Reggie Workman, freaking greatest dudes of all time. Ed Blackwell playing rhythm logs. I mean, a lot of it has to do. How does J-Rad, knowing that it is almost dead, how does that music lend itself to no tonal center? I mean, how does that happen? If you could possibly put that into words.
Well, I think, you know, it's just, you know, that the way that we're approaching that songbook is that really nothing is everything's fair game. You know, anything that we come up with, Joe's awesome like that as a band leader, in that, you know, there's no music that it's like, we're like, oh, well, we're not going to do that. You know,
right.
There's literally nothing. And I think that as a group, as the collective, that type of music is on our radar. You know, it's just like floating around in our gray matter, because all of us have just spent time checking out that, you know, that way of playing, or that way of thinking. which is just completely going for it, like just not worrying about anything, where you're kind of focusing more on playing the energy of the moment. The notes become completely inconsequential at that point. Yeah, and Joe has set up a real thing on stage with us where nothing is that's not out of the question to go there. It's encouraged.
This is fascinating. Yeah, this is interesting stuff. I mean, the because the harmonic theory. Is that like do you have a working group now, or if you're a sideman in it, or anything that do you have a band that you play free music in with?
No, but it's funny. I hope to be either. There's something coming, for sure.
Right on. It's on your mind. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, in your vision, what would be the? I mean, free music, people take on a lot of different. Sometimes it's like Archie Shepp, could be Dollar Brand, it could be Pharoah Saunders. I mean, it could be anybody. I mean, what is free music to Scott Metzger?
Well, yeah. I mean, I like the idea of complete freedom and just completely off the grid, but then landing on a sort of idea, where checking in every now and again just to make sure that everybody feels safe. I'm not one to be super down with just 45 minutes of just free stuff. Like however long you said that Archie track shep is, that's about my limit.
That's about 18 minutes. Yeah, that's what I wanted to. I'm glad
that's enough, because my brain just can't. It's too much information, to try and keep up with after a certain point for me. But if my brain can get a rest and be like, oh, okay, cool, we've landed in something and it's in 4/4 or it's in some sort of meter that I know what it is and sort of feel home base. It's kind of like, okay, you can get a second wind to then, fuck off and just go for it again and let it all fall apart and stay there for a while.
Oh yeah.
But I need that recharge every once in a while. That's just for me. I know some guys can just go all night. Well,
but it's also chaos. There's something to be said about. What was impressive to me is that with the Wolf band, going back to that for a minute, just the idea of your solos are generally very coherent and really long. So there's a big difference between just being up there and wanking it or catching fire, but then not knowing when to turn it off. But what do you say to how many people? Do you feel like you really are starting to get your sea legs in a lot of ways? I was there with a couple of buddies of mine. One of them who's a prodigious guitar player in his own right, although he kind of refuses to really step out into a live setting. And I was hoping you could talk about do you get a chance to work with any cats that have come out of these music factories, the Manhattan School of Music, Juilliard, younger kids, William Patterson, if you get a chance to work with them, or you only stuck around you didn't even graduate from William Patterson, did you?
Eventually I did, but it took a minute. I had to keep going back.
Why was that? That was just because it was academia is not a place for your ears or vocabulary to grow. Can you talk about? I just think that you're a shepherd in your own way. You're leading a group. I want you to talk about why you didn't, or what are those cats doing? What do you feel about the setup today with our current musical structure? I just talked to Joao Donato. I don't know if you ever listened to any of his records. Great pianist, and it's like, Dizzy was like, come, Dizzy Gillespie's like, come play jazz with me, you know, and he's like, no, I'm too scared, you know. He was playing with Mongo Santa Maria, you know, playing like Latin jazz or Latin music, salsa music, but he was totally, it was like a, whatever, it was you had Renee Block saying you can't play Latin music, and then that night he's on the bandstand with Cal Jader and Willie Bobo and Mongo playing. So it was all field. It was all, or he grew up in the Amazon.
Yeah.
He grew up in the forests. I know I'm not turning back the clock here, but you weren't steeped in academia. And I just wonder what you feel about, now that you're establishing yourself, what these cats really need to most learn that they don't get in academia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've always thought it's good to have the vocabulary. It's good to have the academic stuff, just to understand it, you know? Because, you know, if you don't have an understanding or some sort of, it's like a respect, you know, for your elders and the tradition.
Right.
I feel like that there's going to be something lacking, you know? I really feel like that there'll be like, you might not be able to quite put your finger on it if you heard somebody playing that just sort of started like, I'm just going to make up my own thing, you know? But I've always thought that's really important. But, you know, then you have to sort of, to me, at some point, you know, the playing, a show is not about like going and seeing somebody that is just going over stuff that they've been practicing for weeks on end in their apartment and then performing it flawlessly, you know? Like, I'll go see like a classical thing at Carnegie Hall if I want to see that, you know, and that certainly has its place, you know? But for me, if you're going to be an improviser, you know, you have to, you know, you got to respect and own up to the fact that you're playing in the moment, and that's a big responsibility. And to take that seriously means that you sort of have to look at some realities, which is like, you know, the reality is that we're on like a huge piece of rock, like hurling through time and space all the time, you know, and are in very, very little is in our control,
right.
You know. And I think, to me, any kind of great music somehow has that in it, or that's the message or feeling that is conveyed in one way or another. I don't care what, you know, it doesn't matter. Genres don't matter at all, you know. But if that feeling of sort of like excitement and, you know, wonder and fear, you know, it's like it's all in there, right, in the moment. And that's what great improvisers are doing, in my opinion, you know. And to, you know, though, you know, if you get it, I don't think that anybody's saying that in any workshops at colleges. Maybe they are. I don't know. They should be.
I mean, let me ask you a question. Like, you talk about respect of your elders, and I, you know, some of the cats that came up playing R&B, blues, and they talk about, I think, did you have an opportunity to respect your elders, not just by, like, working within a unit of older cats at any point, meaning that, like, you know, where, you know,
yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, let's look at Miles's, like, what the opportunities that existed. Just look at Miles's band from Bitches Brew. You know, McLaughlin went off and did his thing. Chick Corea did his thing. Keith Jarrett did his thing. Those cats, you know, Billy, you know, with Horace Silver. Silver had, so these were apprenticeships, right? And that to me was really the way to learn from your elders, and not in a classroom. Did you have an opportunity to do something like where you were able to?
I've taken every opportunity I could find, and in a lot of cases, forced opportunities to do things like that. You know.
Can you give an example?
Yeah. I mean, the best example is, you know, just for me, because I'm a big part of my background is like sort of Motown, old school, sort of. You know, it's funny the way that you learn about music, and I learned a lot about music from Martin Scorsese movies growing up.
Really?
Before I knew what before I knew what Phil Spector was, because I and still am like a huge movie guy,
Right.
always, and you know, it's a big part of my life. It's a really important thing, and you know, I was into movies before I was in music. Really, like when I was like a little kid, and I saw a lot of Scorsese movies, probably movies that 9-year-olds should not be. You know,
Were you watching like Serpico or
you know,
what were you watching?
No, I was talking about, you know, like Taxi Driver.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean,
you know, Mean Streets. You know, the music in Taxi Driver is unbelievable.
that is true.
You know,
it's
unbelievable soundtrack. And anyway,
so you were just grooving. You said you kind of your introduction was I didn't know that, but it was Motown. It was the old school You could continue on that.
yeah, well, that was just a big part of me, and you know, that music that I heard in those movies, and a big thing that Scorsese always had in his movies were the girl group stuff, the Phil Spector stuff, and you know, and so that stuff is like so near and dear to my heart. And years later, I got the chance to play in Lala Brooks' band, who was in the Crystals, who sang. She was lead vocals on "Be My Baby" and "Then He Kissed Me."
Wow!
I think.
Wow!
And I think Darlene Love did the other one. She did like "He's a Rebel" and stuff. But the Crystals were really like,
and then
they were one of Phil Spector's. Yeah, yeah. You know, and it's got that great guitar thing. You know, that boom, 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 boom. And I played in her group for about a year, and I got to play that every night. You know, like whenever we had gigs. She doesn't tour, but you know, we would do. You know, they do these like sort of like oldies revivals. Gigs, like there'll be all day gigs, and it would be things like her and the surviving members of the Coasters and the Penguins, you know, all these great, like really great old bands that, you know, now, you know, they're not selling out the Garden or anything, but you know, it's a specific thing. But I got anyway, long story short, I got the chance to play in her band, and just to be around her and like that school of guys, you know, because I was the youngest guy in the band by a long shot. You know, I think that you learn a lot from playing with people that have been around, but I think that you learn just as much, and in some cases more, by just being around an energy. You know,
could you talk? You just said I learned a lot from being around those guys. What did you learn the most about? Could you talk about what you learned from them?
Well, a lot of them, you know, the first thing that they'll be, once they, you know, when they like you and they're willing to like pass on some knowledge, a lot of older musicians, you know, the first thing that they're going to tell you is be careful about your money. You know, because everybody's been burned so hard, you
Big
know,
time.
in the business.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's, you know, and when you talk to older guys, you know, that's always sort of a theme, you know, like be smart about the money and all that. But in terms of, you know, that's not very romantic to hear about, but it's the way it is.
But I think that, I mean, in some ways, and again, these are, I just want to preface it by saying, you know, I've been talking to a lot of cats about the jazz life. Again, we're not talking necessarily about jazz, but I mean, part of that life was, I mean, maybe Grant Green was getting paid in heroin instead of money. You know, I mean, again.
Well, yeah.
Some of it was they got taken advantage of, and that part of it was why the music seemed to be crying out with authenticity was because they were living a blues life. I just think anyway. Go ahead, continue on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little. I have mixed feelings about that sort of thing, because I also know and have seen, and we've all heard plenty of stories of guys that. I think that back then, when the business was becoming the business and things were becoming new, I think that it was very much like, you know, the guy. I think it was easier to take advantage of people back then, you know, like years and years ago, than it is now.
And you're right.
Because
I agree with
now,
you 100%. Yeah.
You know, if you're smart and if you're smart about things and you're tough and you're sort of just like aware, again, it kind of goes back to like being aware of, you know, paying respect to the past, like learning from the past, like, you know, in a different way, you know how it's gone down in the past. Now you can educate yourself, you know, and if you don't, then you got nobody to blame but yourself, you know. on those sorts of things.
So the cats would talk to you about don't get burned with your money, but was it also something to the effect of like, like also like say what you need to say and get it done? Were there certain sort of like feel or musicianship or
yeah, sure. There was always, a lot of the biggest stuff that I've taken away that I try and always keep in the front of my mind is, especially for guitar, playing the guitar, is like, don't get carried away with gear, like, don't have a million pedals on the floor, and don't, for me, this is for me. I know, some guys make it work brilliantly. It can be real musicians with gadgets. I, for one, am not there. Maybe I will be someday, but for now I'm not. Just get a good sound. Like a good guitar sound should sound like a good guitar, first and foremost. And then put some effects on things. And the other big thing, that was it. So basically tone. Have a good tone. And the other thing would be to play with great rhythm. Really own rhythm, like dominate rhythm.
Wow.
Because you can play anything if it has a good feel. You can play any notes. It does not matter to me. It does not matter if the notes that you're playing are like quote unquote correct, or inside the mode or whatever. If you're playing with good time and it feels good, it'll be convincing. People will buy it, and they'll go with you. You can drag them through it with you. Like, you can play whatever you want if you just like sort of make rhythm, like I say, if you just dominate rhythm, if you have an overriding confidence with your rhythm.
This is, and I have a feeling that you are going to. Well, first of all, David T. Walker was one of those classic Motown guitarists that you're talking about. Played on a lot of those sessions. But the one cat that I interviewed recently, did 2 interviews with him, is Buzzy Featon. He said to me, and I want you to talk about this because you were getting at it with the tone. He said, people are focused on chops and notes and technique, and they forget to listen to the sound they're making. Not everybody, of course. There's some fantastically technically brilliant players that also have a great tone. The two things are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes first liking the sounds you're making and then working on your technique is the way to go. Did you do that?
Yes and no. The focus on sound is I wish that I had come to it a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. It's sort of the new big Mount Everest of musical thing to work on, just the realization that sound is just so important. Because I like any other guitar player, I grew up in the 90s and I got a solid state amp and plugged into a Fender that had lace sensor pickups, which, if you don't know about technical stuff, these two, solid state amps and lace sensor pickups are not known for their, great soul stirring tones.
Right. Yeah, just Guitar Hero.
Yeah, right. And that was my idea of a guitar sound as I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And, the idea of tone and, stuff is new. I spent plenty of time, put it this way, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the notes to play and getting the vocabulary together. But when you open up looking at tone, it's an endless thing. I don't think you ever wake up and you're like, okay, I've arrived at my sound. This is how it's going to stay forever, and my amp settings are like this forever. I don't want that. But the exploration of tone it's a massive conversation.
Would you say the light went off when you started to get into cats like Jim Hall? Was there kind of a pivotal moment you could point to where you started to become, because obviously sequencing of ideas and vocabulary, it's important. You played those ballads, man, in the second set. That was like a cool tonic for me at that point. But
Cool.
you know, could you point to a time when you realized that how important it was that you liked the sound that was coming out of your guitar, as opposed to what you were,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, it kind of got to it. You know, I don't know. Like when I was playing in New York, when I first started playing in New York, I just sort of had to play with what I had, you know. And I had a guitar and I had an amp, and it was like nothing special. And I'd never thought about the combination of the two, you know, which is really important. Every guitar works differently with every amp, you know. And when I started meeting guys in New York, guys like, you know, there was like Jim Campolongo and a guy named Doug Womble and a guy named Teddy Kumpel. These are guitar players in the city who have thought about Adam Levy. He was another one who have thought about, you know, tone and the sound of their guitar for years and years and years, and it really made it a really important thing. And that was when I think that those guys, you know, because next to those guys, I mean, they would play and then I would play, and I was like, you know, this thing, it sounded, my guitar just sounded like a toy,
right,
you know,
right.
compared to what these guys, you know, these guys were like, you know, they sounded like redwood trees, like with roots in the earth, those type tones, you know.
Wow.
And I was sort of just like this floppy thing, you know, that was just kind of plunking along. So I think there was when I was introduced to those guys.
I'm curious about we've lost. I was actually Michael Shreve called me and got on me a little bit about doing this post about Greg Allman too soon after his passing, about whether he was a forerunner in Southern rock or a pioneer or whatever. And we've just a lot of cats from that generation. We're losing a lot of them. And I would like you to talk about Larry Coryell for a minute. Is that somebody that you got off on, and what do you think?
I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about him. I certainly know the name, and I know he's well respected. I really have never gone through a thing, and that's not to say that I checked it out and didn't feel it. He's just one of those guys I really haven't got.
I dig. No, this is the honesty that the Jake Feinberg Show likes to get at. So let's talk about the tone. We talk about tone of the guitar. I would love you to just. I was inspired to see this video clip of they auctioned off for the audience Jerry Garcia's Tiger Axe. I see this video of you on stage. Casal was there, and I think it was Eyes of the World. Well, I have a quote ready to go up on Facebook about Casal. He's been obsessing on watching your solo for you know, he's been watching it over and over again. But put that aside. What was that tone? What did it feel like? Just that experience in itself. It was a pretty. I mean, Neil said it was pretty trippy kind of event. But I just want you to take us through it, and ultimately, what did that guitar feel like?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say, like, if Neil's spouting praises about me, that's. I take that as an enormous compliment.
Oh, dude, I'll send you the interview because he said. Well, he's sort of anyway. You guys are both authentically searching musicians, but yeah, he was fired up about that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, great. Well, he played some great shit that night, and we talked afterwards. And I mean, he thinks about stuff that I really respect while he's playing. You know,
Absolutely.
He thinks about cool shit that most guitar players do not focus on. He's the real deal. Well, yeah. I mean, I you know, that was a total surprise to at least me. I didn't know that I'd be playing that guitar that night. They had. It's funny, you know, because you know, it's like I think it's sold in a long time ago. You know, it's a piece of rock history, right? So it sells for a lot of money. It's very expensive. But the guitar sort of had like a handler that was carrying it around all night. And we were, it was sort of like, everybody'd be like looking at the knobs or something, and the guy would come up and kind of be like, "All right, take a step back."
Yeah,
Everybody
like let's
take a step back.
a handler.
Don't even look at it. It can never be played.
Don't touch it.
Yeah. And I had heard that nobody was going to be playing it, which I thought was totally reasonable. I didn't expect that. And then, 2 or 3 songs into the show, they brought it out and they handed it to Neil. And, you really felt the whole room sort of, everybody stood up and took notice immediately.
Wow.
The whole room changed for sure. Because that's why everybody was there, too, was because of that guitar that night, since they were auctioning it off. But they and then Neil handed it off to me, and I'm not super sentimental about those kinds of things. I feel like guitars are instruments meant to be played, and I sort of, they gave me the guitar, and I just sort of said, all right, well, you're not going to get this opportunity again, so you might as well make it count.
I dig, man. No, it's listen, you got your axe, let's go to work. I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. And I sort of just, did my best to, in that moment, to just be like, okay, well, I'm here to play guitar, and I was also really tired that night. I had played in San Francisco the night before and had flown across the country. I'd been on a 6 a.m. flight, so I was sort of like a little sort of, how you get when you get tired.
Well, I mean, it's not a good scene for me at all. I mean, I shut down. But I mean, what gig was that in San Francisco, by the way? What gig were you on?
I played it. I was playing at Terrapin Crossroads, Phil Lesh's club out there. I was doing a gig there with some friends.
Oh, that's great. But
it was excellent, and it was with Andy Hess was playing bass. We were sort of playing. We played some Wolf songs, and our friend Sonny Ozell got up and sang with us. Andy Hess was playing bass, and Ethan Eubanks, who was Joe Sample's last drummer, I think, for the last couple of years of Joe Sample's life. Yeah, and our friend Bryn Roberts was playing keys, who's Roseanne Cash's keyboard player. I mean, it was a good band, And so we finished at about midnight there, and on about 3 hours sleep, I went to the airport, and it's just like, it's just like standard musician stuff. 3 hours sleep, get on the plane, go straight to sound check when you land in New York with a 3 hour time difference, and just do the gig. But that can really help you play really great, because you kind of, you kind of get this fuck it kind of attitude, when you're that tired and you have to work. Like, you sort of like dig deep. And I think that was just kind of the attitude where they gave me the guitar, and it was like, all right, well, fuck it. Like, I know how to play this song, and I'm going to play it the way that I play it, just on this guitar, and try and put out of your head for a minute, that you're holding a piece of rock and roll history that's going to sell for $2 million in a few minutes.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that to me is so. To me, I don't know. I mean, how have you kind of overcome a lot of the mental? To me, at this point, the mental thing is much harder for cats than the actual technical application of it. The idea of getting caught up in that moment, that this thing is a piece of rock history, that, I am tired. I want to have some respect, and and then by the time you're thinking about that, you're flubbing your solo. To me, there's a mental component. Like, how have you?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
How have you become mentally stronger in your career? I think that's the better question.
Yeah. Well, for me, the less I care how it turns out, the better I play. And it's just consistent. And the catch to that is that, you want to, my mind anyway, I can't speak for anybody else, but my mind in certain situations wants to be like, this is a big deal. You got to sound good, you know? And as soon as that, you know, I've really taught myself to be on the lookout for that voice. And the second I feel that or whatever, I sort of take a real deep breath and just steamroll over that thinking.
You don't feel, you feel like you run over it and not stifle it? Because I mean, you feel like it's something that...
No, it's a part of me that isn't, you know, it's not correct. Because I know that if I listen to that,
right.
You know, if I listen to that voice, because there certainly was that voice where it was like, holy shit, like this guy's handing me, you know, a guitar that, you know, I'd listened to a lot, and, you know, everybody's looking at this thing, and this is a big deal,
right?
You know, but the fact is that it kind of goes back to that concept earlier of just like hurling through time and space. It's like, you know, we're making music right now. It doesn't matter what I'm making it on, you know, even if it's, you know, that guitar, you know, some like fancy guitar that's really, you know, I mean, I've clearly, I'm in a position where you know, somebody gave me that guitar to play, so I'm going to play it the way that I play. You know, it was the same feeling when J-Rad did the First Bank Center a couple of weeks ago, which is the hockey arena in Denver, which was my first arena gig, headlining arena gig, like where I was singing. I've done, you know, I've done big gigs, but that was a new experience, and there was that voice where it was like absolute terror, you know,
right.
Just because it's a new situation, you know.
Absolutely.
But you know, you just got to buckle down and just do it. You know, you just like plow into it, and you know, it's not the time to, you know, you can think about what a big deal it was afterwards, you know, but in the moment, you know, there was a great Kenny Werner,
sure,
who wrote Effortless Mastery. He I saw him once give a lecture, and he said that to him, doesn't matter if he's playing at Carnegie Deli or Carnegie Hall. He said, it's you're doing the same thing. You know, the surroundings and the atmosphere is completely inconsequential. And I always I've thought about that a lot, especially over the last few years with J-Rad, you know, blowing up the way that it has.
It's interesting talking to Scott Metzger here on the Jake Feinberg Show. I wanted to I'm just paraphrasing here, but I'm not sure if you've ever crossed paths or seen the chanter Krishnadas.
No.
So he was very much involved with Ram Dass, going to India, and their spiritual guru is Maharaji. And the thing is that Krishnadas was horribly depressed. He was doing a lot of drugs, and never really accessed. I'm giving you the Cliff Notes version, but he has become one of the greatest Hindu chanters now. I mean, one of the most well-recognized, celebrated chanters. In 1994, he was like near suicide. He's much older than us, but he was tormented. And we're talking about, and he goes, I don't sing for bliss. He's like, I sing to fucking live. And
right.
I kind of wanted to ask you about that mentality, being a musician, the life of a musician, you know, going to play cosmic music on this spiraling rock or whatever you said that you made that beautiful reference to. You know, for Scott Metzger, if you didn't play music, would you fucking die?
Yeah, well, it's probably either this or a convenience store for me, you know?
Right, dude. Yeah, dude. Me too, man.
Because I really don't know, you know? I just don't know.
But I know, you know what it is? When you talk about, you said, I've learned to get to a point where Carnegie Deli, Carnegie Hall, it's the same. Mm-hmm. I approach something with the idea of, I don't really care how it sounds. that's what your mentality is. And part of that has to do, like, there's a misconception, I think, sometimes, definitely as really a non-professional musician, from my point of view, as, just someone who just fucks around, it's that people are trying to get to this state of bliss when in fact they're doing it to breathe. They're doing it to live. Like, when you get, can you talk about that feeling? Because I mean, I don't want to be overly dramatic but literally Krishna Das was like, dude, I don't sing for bliss, even though that chanting does have a meditative quality to it. And the crowd is clearly in a nice state, most of the time. And that's what they're seeking. He's not, he's doing it to live. I just kind of wanted you to see, where do you fit into that whole thing as far as music? I mean, Casal said it too. He said, I just put up this quote from him. He just said, he's like, he's like, when I'm surfing, I think about this stuff. When I'm totally honest with myself, the thing that gnaws at me the most is writing songs, and not just writing them, but writing good songs. More than having a family or anything is singing, performing, and writing songs. And so he actually, he sort of, I played him that I don't have the quote, I don't have the audio queued up from Krishna Das, but he kind of, after 8 minutes, kind of came around and said, life can be lived infinitely in many different ways, but I don't even want to think about if I couldn't be a musician.
Yeah, I just don't know what it would be like. Right now I'm in the middle of about 2.5 weeks-ish. I think I have one gig in the next 2.5 weeks, but it's just like a small, it's playing at a local bar because I enjoy it. And I sort of had that on the calendar, like coming up, and I was like, oh great, 2.5 weeks. For me, that's a very long time to not have any gigs or any work. And I got like 2 days into that window, I guess, and I just started, like learning this like huge piece of music, that I said, okay, I'll spend like a few minutes on it today. And then like 4.5 hours later, I'm like still there, like in my kitchen, just like totally looking at it. And I got to the end, and then I like went online and I was like, oh no, I need to like look at some guitar stuff, like looking at pickups to put into a guitar. And then at like the end of the day, I was like, Jesus, it's like I spent 70% of the day doing music stuff on this, like the third day. I got through 2 days of like not being able to do music stuff. And then on the third day of 2.5 weeks, it's like took up the whole day, And it's just, I don't know. It's what I enjoy, It's what makes me feel like, God, it sounds dramatic, but like, it makes me feel like I got a purpose,
Absolutely.
And I'm moving towards something in the big picture, No,
I did. I mean,
it makes.
I mean, it's just. Are you going to be able to? Are you like where? How many days into this 2.5 week hiatus, besides the bar gig? Where are you at right now? I mean, where
I guess I'm about like coming up at the end of the first week.
Wow,
I played guitar all day yesterday and scheduled a meeting about some stuff today. So I mean,
well, we're hanging. I'm taking we're hanging right now. So you're getting away from it sort of for a minute.
This is
So just can you give before we call it a day? I wanted to ask you, is there anything that coming up in the fall or in the end of the summer that you talk about your upcoming the gigs you're playing, and is there anything new on the horizon for Metzger?
Yeah, well, next month next month I'm doing a handful of dates with playing an Amy Helms band.
Oh yeah,
which I'm very, very excited about.
Is it Dirt Farmer Band? What's the name of the band?
I think she's calling it the Handsome Strangers right now.
Wow.
I'm not 100% sure. But it's a great band, and I'm really looking forward to working with her. We did a rehearsal the other day, and it went great. But those are going to be really good shows. There's always Almost Dead stuff on the horizon. Wolf is recording soon. There's a lot of moving parts and things coming up, and working on booking a couple of more solo shows. So there's things keeping busy to keep out of trouble.
Well, no, that's what I wanted to ask you about. Was this just for the audience, the reference? I don't get out to see a lot of live music, period, here in Tucson. I should get more, but with family responsibilities and whatnot, doing interviews, having my purpose, as Metzger was talking about. But towards the end of the first set on the boat, the last song, this violin player appeared on the stage. I was hoping you could shed some light on who this character was, and because I thought that brought it brought a whole New York rock and roll ensemble kind of feel to the whole thing.
Yeah, isn't she great? Her name is Katie Jacoby, and she's a local, she's a New York City violinist, and she sat in with Almost Dead last year, and she's we've been lucky enough to get her to come and play with Wolf a couple of times, and I think it really works. Like she's a killer musician. She's really world class, and the violin thing really works great with in Wolf's setting for sure. But yeah, Katie's great. Everybody should definitely check her out.
Well,
I know that she's working on a solo record actually now too. So she'll have stuff out there sooner than later.
Does she enjoy like the quality of Wolf, the stretching out quality? I mean, does she have more of a classical background? It seemed like she really enjoyed just being in a more of a sort of a liberated setting.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I guess that's probably true for most violinists, right? Like I feel like the most violinists are coming out of a
I think probably.
But I know that
you're right. Yeah, right? Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that she did come up out of a classical background, but then I know that she went through a metal phase too, like where she sat in with Exodus.
Wow.
Which I just thought was like the coolest thing ever, because I was like such an Exodus fan that when I was 14 or 15. Yeah. So.
I just it's always an honor to talk to you, man. I just wish you the best of luck. Continue to stay humble and continue to inspire other people, because I had an opportunity to meet my spiritual teacher, T.C.G. Munoz, when I was back east, and he just
cool.
I think he just said we have time is there should be an urgency to anybody creating art, because I think time is fleeting, and so just continue to pursue that, man, and continued success, man.
Cheers, well, back at you, Jake.
All right, man.
Appreciate that.
See you around.
Sounds good. Thanks
Peace.
so much for having me.
Always. Peace.